Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and into the massive docking bay of Nexus Prime. The space station stretched endlessly in all directions, its corridors wide enough to fit 3 Earth battleships side by side. Beings from dozens of different worlds walked past him, some floating, others crawling on multiple legs, and a few that seemed to be made of pure energy. "First time seeing this place?" asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez as she joined him on the platform. Her uniform looked plain compared to the glittering armor and exotic materials worn by the other delegates. "Yeah," Morrison replied, watching a group of crystal-like aliens glide past without making a sound. "Makes you feel pretty small, doesn't it?" They followed the signs toward the War Council chambers, walking behind a delegation of towering reptilian creatures whose scales gleamed like metal. The Velkari were known throughout the galaxy as the Coalition's strongest military force. Their leader, Admiral Zethkar, stood nearly 8 feet tall and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. The War Council chamber was a circular room with seats arranged in rising tiers. Earth had been given 2 small seats in the back corner, barely visible from the center stage. Morrison and Rodriguez took their places and watched as the other delegations filled the massive space. There were representatives from 47 different worlds, each more impressive than the last. "The human delegation looks a bit out of place," whispered a voice nearby. Morrison turned to see a Chithan delegate, its insect-like features clicking, with what he assumed was amusement. The creature's multiple eyes studied the humans with obvious curiosity. "I heard they only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago." Admiral Zethkar called the meeting to order with a voice that echoed through the chamber like thunder. "We gathered today to discuss the growing threat of the Void Reapers. These unknown attackers have destroyed 12 outer colonies in the past 6 months. Each attack leaves nothing behind. No survivors, no wreckage, nothing." Holographic displays showed the locations of the attacks scattered across the galaxy's outer rim. The damage was severe, entire worlds simply vanishing from long-range sensors. "We need every member species to contribute their full military strength," Zethkar continued. "The Velkari offer 50,000 warships, each equipped with plasma cannons capable of cracking a planet's surface." The reptilian delegates roared their approval. Morrison had seen the reports on Velkari technology. Their weapons could indeed destroy entire worlds. A delegation of crystal beings rose next. Their spokesperson, a tall figure that seemed to bend, light around itself, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "The Zenathi commit 30,000 vessels with quantum disruptors. Our weapons can tear holes in reality itself." More cheers filled the chamber. Morrison had heard rumors about quantum weapons but had never seen them in action. The technology was far beyond anything Earth possessed. The Nebulans came next, their gaseous forms floating above their seats. "We offer 20,000 ships with phase technology. Our vessels can become incorporeal, passing through solid matter at will." One by one, each species announced their contributions: energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids, shields that could stop black holes, ships that could travel between dimensions. The humans sat quietly, taking notes and trying not to look too impressed. Finally, Zethkar's gaze fell on the human delegation. "And what does Earth offer to our cause?" Morrison stood up, feeling very small in the vast chamber. "Earth pledges 200 ships to the Coalition fleet." Silence filled the room for a moment, then someone started laughing. Morrison couldn't tell which species it came from, but soon the entire chamber was filled with various sounds of amusement. The Velkari roared, the Chithan clicked rapidly, and the crystalline Zenathi made musical tinkling sounds. 200? Zethkar asked, his voice dripping with barely contained humor. "And what weapons do these ships carry?" "Kinetic weapons, primarily," Morrison replied, his face burning with embarrassment. "Railguns, missile systems, and nuclear warheads." The laughter grew louder. A Chithan delegate stood up, its multiple arms gesturing wildly. "Kinetic weapons? You mean you throw rocks at your enemies?" "They're sophisticated projectile systems," Rodriguez said, standing beside Morrison. "Our railguns can accelerate tungsten rounds to significant fractions of light speed. How charming, said a Nebulan representative. Chemical propulsion and metal projectiles. Like something from a museum. Zethkar raised a scaled hand for silence. Captain Morrison, your enthusiasm is admirable, but perhaps humans would be better, suited to support roles. Supply runs perhaps, or courier duties. Leave the actual fighting to species with appropriate technology. Morrison felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice steady. With respect, Admiral, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know something about combat. Fighting other humans with primitive weapons, scoffed a Velkari officer. These Void Reapers are beyond anything your species has encountered. They absorb energy weapons, adapt to new technologies within hours, and show no mercy to any living thing. The Chithan delegate clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Actually, humans might serve a useful purpose. Their reproduction rates are acceptable and they seem willing to take risks. Perhaps they could serve as scouts. Expendable ones, of course. More laughter filled the chamber. Morrison's hands formed fists at his sides, but he forced himself to remain calm. Rodriguez placed a gentle hand on his arm, a warning to keep his temper under control. Very well, Zethkar announced. Human forces will be assigned to patrol the outer spiral. It's a quiet sector where they can gain experience without interfering with real military operations. The meeting continued with discussions of strategy and logistics, but the humans were largely ignored. When other delegates spoke to them at all, it was with the kind of condescending politeness usually reserved for children. After the session ended, Morrison and Rodriguez walked back toward the Yao docking bay in silence. Other delegates passed them in the corridors, still chuckling among themselves. Did you hear what the humans said about kinetic weapons? Morrison heard a Velkari officer telling his companions. As if throwing chunks of metal could stop the Void Reapers. Primitive species always think their crude methods are special, replied another. Give them a few years and they'll learn to appreciate real technology. Rodriguez waited until they were alone in the transport shuttle before speaking. Captain, they have no idea what they just did. Morrison activated the shuttle's engines and began the journey back to the human fleet. No, they don't. But they're about to find out why you never underestimate a species that clawed its way to the stars. Through the shuttle's viewport, he could see the human fleet waiting in formation. 200 ships that had been dismissed as primitive relics. Morrison smiled grimly as he thought about Earth's military history. Humans had always been underestimated, and it had always been a mistake. Set course for the outer spiral, he told Rodriguez. Let's go show these aliens what human warfare really looks like. The shuttle accelerated away from Nexus Prime, carrying the two humans toward what the Coalition considered the least important front in the war. Behind them, the massive space station continued its business, its inhabitants confident that the real fighting would be done by real warriors with real weapons. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest tactical error in galactic history. 3 months had passed since the War Council meeting. Commander Steve Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the peaceful star systems of the outer spiral through the main viewport. His small patrol fleet of 12 ships had been assigned to this quiet sector far from any real action. Another boring day in paradise, muttered Chief Engineer Lisa Park as she checked the ship's systems. When was the last time we even saw a cargo freighter out here? 2 weeks ago, replied pilot Danny Quinn from his station, and that was just a mining survey ship that got lost. Carter smiled at his crew's complaints. The outer spiral was indeed quiet, but he preferred it that way. His ships were converted civilian vessels with basic weapons, nothing like the mighty warships of the Velkari or the advanced technology of the other Coalition species. Out here, they could patrol without embarrassing themselves. Dr. Helen Brooks looked up from her science station. Commander, I'm picking up some strange readings from the new Tucson system. The colony's not responding to regular communications. Probably just equipment failure, Carter said. That mining colony is always having problems with their transmitters. But something felt wrong. Carter had learned to trust his instincts during his years in the Earth Defense Force. Set course for New Tucson. Maximum speed. The Liberty and its escort ships jumped to faster-than-light travel. When they dropped back into normal space near New Tucson, Carter immediately knew they were in trouble. "My God," whispered Park, staring at the sensor readings. "The colony is gone." Where New Tucson should have been, there was only empty space. No debris, no energy signatures, nothing. 50,000 beings from various species had simply vanished. "Commander," Quinn called out, his voice tight with fear. "We've got company." Massive shapes emerged from what appeared to be empty space. The ships were unlike anything Carter had ever seen, their hulls seeming to shift and pulse like living tissue. They moved with an organic flow that was both beautiful and terrifying. "Void Reapers," Brooks said, her face pale. "It has to be." Carter counted 15 enemy vessels, each one larger than his entire fleet combined. The alien ships began moving toward the human patrol, their hulls glowing with an eerie light. "All ships, battle stations," Carter ordered. "Prepare for combat." The first Void Reaper ship fired what looked like a beam of living darkness. The USS Denver, one of Carter's escort vessels, tried to block it with energy shields. The beam passed right through the shields as if they weren't there and struck the ship's hull. Carter watched in horror as the Denver's armor began to dissolve like acid was eating through it. "Energy weapons are useless," reported Park. "Their beams are passing through our shields like they don't exist." Carter saw the USS Portland try to fight back with plasma cannons. The bright energy bolt struck a Void Reaper ship and simply disappeared into its hull. Worse, the alien vessel seemed to grow stronger, its organic surface healing damage faster than the weapons could cause it. "They're absorbing our energy weapons," Brooks said. The reports were right. They adapt to any energy-based attack. Another human ship exploded as the alien darkness consumed its hull. Carter realized they were about to die, and no one would even know what happened to them. The Coalition's mighty fleets with their advanced weapons would face the same fate. But then, something clicked in Carter's mind. The aliens were absorbing energy, but what about good old-fashioned physical attacks? "All ships, switch to kinetic weapons only," he ordered. "No energy weapons, no shields. Hit them with everything solid we've got." "Sir?" Quinn asked, confusion in his voice. "You heard me. Railguns, missiles, nuclear warheads. Everything that goes boom." The Liberty's railgun fired first, sending a tungsten rod at tremendous speed toward the nearest Void Reaper ship. The projectile struck the alien hull and punched straight through, creating a gaping hole that began leaking strange fluids into space. "Direct hit!" Park shouted. "Their hull is damaged and not healing." Carter grinned fiercely. "That's because you can't adapt to a chunk of metal moving at 10% light speed. All ships focus fire on that damaged vessel." The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space, followed by railgun rounds and old-fashioned explosive shells. The Void Reaper ship tried to regenerate, but physical damage was different from energy damage. You couldn't absorb a hole blown through your hull. The alien ship began to list, its organic systems failing. Carter watched as parts of it began to break away and drift into space. "It's working," Brooks said with amazement. "They can't handle kinetic weapons." But the other Void Reaper ships were learning. They began focusing their attacks on individual, human vessels trying to destroy the fleet before it could do more damage. The USS Miami exploded in a burst of flame as alien beams tore through its hull. "We need a new strategy," Park said. "They're adapting their tactics." Carter looked at the tactical display and made a decision that would have horrified the Coalition commanders. "All ships ramming speed. We're going to show these things what happens when you mess with humans." "Sir, that's suicide," Quinn protested. "Maybe," Carter replied, "but we'll take them with us, and we'll send a message to the rest of the galaxy about what humans are capable of." The USS Liberty accelerated directly toward the largest Void Reaper ship. Carter ordered all hands to the escape pods, but many of his crew chose to stay at their stations. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. At the last second, Carter activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. The Liberty's nuclear reactor overloaded just as it crashed into the alien vessel. The explosion tore through both ships, creating a fireball that could be seen from neighboring star systems. But Carter had ejected in an escape pod at the last moment, along with Park and Quinn. They watched as 3 more human ships followed. The Liberty's example ramming Void Reaper vessels and taking them down with nuclear explosions. The remaining alien ships, faced with an enemy that fought with suicidal determination, began to retreat. They had never encountered a species that would willingly destroy itself to win a battle. "My God," Park whispered as they watched the Void Reapers disappear into the darkness of space. "We actually won." Carter activated his emergency transmitter, sending a message to Coalition headquarters. "This is Commander Carter of the Human Patrol Fleet. We have engaged the Void Reapers and achieved victory. Kinetic weapons are effective. Energy weapons are not. Repeat, physical attacks work. Energy attacks do not." Hours later, rescue ships arrived to find the human survivors floating in their escape pods among the wreckage of 5 Void Reaper vessels. The impossible had happened. The primitive humans had achieved what the Coalition's advanced fleets could not. Back at Nexus Prime, Admiral Zethkar stared at the battle report in disbelief. His aide stood nervously beside him, waiting for orders. "Sir," the aide said carefully, "the humans are requesting immediate reinforcement of kinetic weapons and nuclear warheads." Zethkar's scaled hands gripped the report tighter. For months, Coalition fleets had been retreating from the Void Reapers, their advanced technology useless against an enemy that could adapt to any energy weapon. But humans, with their primitive guns and crude explosives, had won. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we underestimated these mammals." The aide nodded nervously. "Should we approve their request for more weapons?" Zethkar looked out at the Coalition fleet, with all its advanced technology and sophisticated weaponry. Then he thought about 12 human ships defeating 15 Void Reaper vessels through sheer determination and willingness to die fighting. "Approve it," he said, "and send word to all Coalition commanders. They need to learn how humans fight wars." General Bobby Martinez stood in the command center aboard the Coalition flagship Nexus Star, watching the holographic battle displays with growing frustration. Red warning lights blinked across the galaxy map as another star system fell to the Void Reapers. The aliens were adapting faster than anyone had expected. "The Velkari Third Fleet has been destroyed," reported Captain Nicole Wright, her voice grim. "Admiral Zethkar's flagship barely escaped. They lost 800 ships in less than an hour." Martinez shook his head. 3 months ago, the Coalition had been confident that their advanced technology would stop any threat. Now entire fleets were being wiped out by an enemy that seemed to learn from every battle. "What about the Xanathi quantum weapons?" asked Commander Tony Chen from his position at the tactical display. "Useless," Wright replied. "The Void Reapers absorbed the quantum disruptors and turned them back on the Xanathi fleet. Half their ships were destroyed by their own weapons." Martinez walked over to the communication station where Sergeant Kyle Thompson was coordinating with ground forces across the galaxy. The big soldier looked up from his screens with tired eyes. "General, we're getting the same reports from every front," Thompson said. "Energy weapons don't work. Shields are worthless. The aliens adapt to everything we throw at them." "Everything, except kinetic weapons," Martinez said quietly. Word had spread quickly through Coalition ranks about the human victory in the outer spiral. Commander Carter's report had been studied by every military analyst in the galaxy. The conclusion was simple but shocking. Primitive human weapons were the only things that could hurt the Void Reapers. "Sir," Chen called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Zethkar." The holographic display showed the reptilian admiral, his usually perfect scales now scarred from battle. Behind him, Martinez could see the damaged bridge of a Velkari warship. "General Martinez," Zethkar said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "I need human advisors immediately. My fleet cannot fight these creatures with energy weapons alone." Martinez hid his surprise. 3 months ago, this same admiral had laughed at human technology. Now he was begging for help. "What do you need from us, Admiral?" Martinez asked. "Everything," Zethkar replied. "Your weapons, your tactics, your way of thinking. We've lost 12 fleets in the past month. Our people are starting to panic." Martinez looked at his officers. Wright nodded slightly, understanding what needed to be done. "We'll send Captain Wright and a team of specialists. They'll teach your people how to fight like humans." 2 days later, Wright found herself aboard a Velkari battleship, trying to explain human military doctrine to a group of confused reptilian officers. The ship's weapon systems had been hastily retrofitted with human-designed railguns and missile launchers. "You want us to ram enemy ships?" asked a Velkari captain, his scales rippling with what Wright had learned was disbelief. "When necessary," Wright replied calmly. "The important thing is to be unpredictable. Energy weapons follow patterns. They can be analyzed and adapted to. But a ship flying straight at you with nuclear warheads? That's harder to plan for." The Velkari officers looked at each other uncertainly. Their entire military culture was based on technological superiority and precise tactics. The idea of desperate, chaotic fighting went against everything they had been taught. "What about honor in battle?" another officer asked. Wright smiled grimly. "Honor doesn't matter if you're dead. The Void Reapers don't care about honor. They care about survival, same as us. The difference is humans learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to fight dirty to win." Meanwhile, Chen was working with the Xanathi, trying to teach the crystalline beings about combined arms tactics. It was like explaining warfare to living computers. "Your quantum technology is impressive," Chen told the assembled Xanathi commanders. "But you're using it wrong. Instead of trying to destroy enemy ships with quantum disruptors, use them to confuse and distract. Then hit them with physical weapons while they're adapting." The lead Xanathi, a tall figure that bent light around itself, responded with musical tones that the translator rendered as, "This seems inefficient. Our quantum weapons are far more powerful than primitive kinetic systems." "Power isn't everything," Chen replied. "A stick of dynamite isn't as powerful as a nuclear reactor, but it can still blow a hole in your wall. The Void Reapers can absorb your quantum energy, but they can't absorb a tungsten rod moving at light speed." Back on the ground, Thompson was working with mixed-species infantry units, teaching them human urban warfare tactics. The first test came on the colony world of Haven's Edge, where Void Reaper ground forces had landed. "Remember," Thompson told his mixed unit of humans, Velkari, and Chithan soldiers, "these things adapt to energy weapons fast, but they're still made of matter. Bullets, grenades, and good old-fashioned explosions work just fine." The Void Reaper. Ground troops were unlike anything the Coalition had faced before. They moved like liquid, flowing around obstacles and reforming after taking damage. Energy weapons barely slowed them down, but when Thompson's unit opened fire with assault rifles and grenade launchers, the aliens stopped moving. The physical impacts disrupted their fluid forms, and explosive rounds tore holes they couldn't instantly heal. "Keep moving," Thompson shouted as his unit advanced through the colony's streets. "Don't let them adapt to your position. Hit them hard, then move before they figure out a counterattack." The Velkari soldiers, used to standing in formation and firing energy weapons, struggled with the chaotic human tactics, but the results spoke for themselves. For the first time since the invasion began, Coalition ground forces were winning battles. News of human successes spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Other species began requesting human advisors and human weapons. The Nebulans, who had never needed physical weapons before, asked humans to teach them about explosives. The ethereal beings had trouble understanding why anyone would want to blow things up, but they learned quickly when they saw the results. Admiral Morrison, recently promoted from captain, found himself in command of a joint coalition fleet that was half human ships and half alien vessels retrofitted with human weapons. It was a strange sight. Elegant Xanathi crystal ships bristling with crude rail guns, graceful Nebulan gas cloud vessels carrying nuclear missiles. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, now his second in command, "we're receiving surrender offers from 3 Void Reaper scout groups." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Surrender? They've never done that before." "Apparently, they're not used to facing an enemy that fights back effectively," Rodriguez replied. "Our new tactics are working. The combination of human weapons and alien mobility is proving very effective." Martinez joined them on the bridge, a satisfied smile on his weathered face. "You know what the best part is? The other species are starting to think like humans. Yesterday, a Velkari captain suggested using asteroid impacts as weapons. A month ago, they would have called that barbaric. Morrison looked out at the mixed fleet, ships from dozens of worlds united under human tactical doctrine. Any word from the home fronts? The Void Reapers are retreating on all major fronts, Rodriguez reported. They're pulling back to what intelligence thinks is their main staging area. Wherever that is, it's heavily defended. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The war was turning in their favor. But the final battle would be the hardest. The Void Reapers would throw everything they had at the coalition forces. But for the first time since the invasion began, Morrison felt confident. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known. Sometimes the best technology in the universe couldn't replace good old-fashioned determination and the willingness to do whatever it took to win. Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the massive display screen in the Coalition Command Center, staring at the impossible structure that hung in the darkness of space. The Void Reaper home base was larger than most moons, a twisted mass of organic material that pulsed with sickly light. Countless enemy ships swarmed around it like insects protecting a hive. Intelligence reports are confirmed, said Dr. Helen Brooks, now the Coalition's chief xenobiologist. The Void Reapers aren't really invaders. They're refugees from another galaxy running from something that destroyed their home. Fleet Captain Amy Rodriguez studied the scan results with growing understanding. Their ships, their technology, it's all stolen. They consume other species and use their biology to build more weapons. Morrison nodded grimly. Which means that thing out there isn't just their base. It's a massive collection of every civilization they've ever destroyed. The Coalition War Council had spent weeks debating what to do. The Velkari wanted to negotiate, find the Void Reapers a new home in empty space. The Xenathi suggested using quantum weapons to send them to another dimension. Even the warlike Chithan proposed offering them uninhabited worlds to settle. But Morrison knew better. You can't negotiate with something that eats civilizations, he had told the council. These things have consumed entire galaxies. They won't stop until everything living is part of their collective. Now he stood ready to prove that humans understood something about warfare that other species had forgotten. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster was to become something even more dangerous. Operation Extinction is ready, reported Major General Lisa Park, now in charge of experimental weapons. Every human ship is loaded with everything we've got. Nuclear warheads, antimatter bombs, biological weapons, chemical explosives. If it can destroy organic matter, we're carrying it. Colonel Danny Quinn, promoted after his heroics in the Outer Spiral, grinned from his pilot station. The alien ships think we're crazy for loading our vessels with so many explosives. They're not wrong. Morrison activated the fleet communications. Spread out before him was the largest military force in galactic history. Human ships formed the E-core, their hulls bristling with every weapon of mass destruction Earth had ever invented. Around them flew the vessels of 46 other species, all following human tactical doctrine. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he began. 6 months ago you laughed at human weapons, you called us primitive. You said our kinetic guns and chemical explosives were museum pieces. He paused, looking at the faces of his mixed crew. Humans, Velkari, Xenathi, Chithan, and dozens of other species working together under one flag. Today you're going to learn why humans never stopped building better ways to destroy things. The Void Reapers feed on fear and despair. They expect their enemies to run or surrender. But they've never faced a species that finds joy in righteous destruction. The fleet began its approach to the massive organic structure. Immediately, thousands of Void Reaper ships poured out to meet them. The enemy vessels had adapted since the early battles, incorporating captured Coalition technology into their biological hulls. They're using our own quantum weapons against us, Rodriguez observed as the first enemy salvos struck Coalition shields. Doesn't matter, Morrison replied. Park, begin the broadcast. Throughout the fleet, human ships began transmitting something the Void Reapers had never encountered before. It wasn't a weapon or a shield or advanced technology. It was pure human defiance set to the most aggressive music Earth had ever produced. The sound waves carried humanity's absolute refusal to submit, their determination to take their enemies down with them, their complete lack of fear in the face of certain death. For a species that fed on terror and despair, it was like poison. The Void Reaper ships faltered in their attack, their organic systems struggling to process something so alien to their nature. They had consumed thousands of species, but none had ever broadcast their own destruction with such savage joy. "All human ships, execute ramming pattern Alpha," Morrison ordered. What followed was the most insane military maneuver in galactic history. Human vessels loaded with enough explosives to crack planets accelerated directly toward the Void Reaper base. They didn't dodge enemy fire or try to protect themselves. They simply flew straight at their target, broadcasting defiance and preparing to die. The first human ship to reach the base was the USS Boston, commanded by one of Morrison's old friends from Earth. It struck the organic surface and detonated in a nuclear fireball that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The explosion tore a massive hole in the structure's hull. "Direct hit," Quinn reported with fierce satisfaction. "The base is taking damage." More human ships followed, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize a continent. They punched through the Void Reaper defenses, not through superior technology or clever tactics, but through sheer determination to complete their mission, regardless of cost. The alien species in the fleet watched in amazement and horror as humans threw away their lives with cheerful efficiency. This wasn't just warfare. This was something beyond the understanding of any rational military mind. "The organic structure is failing," Brooks reported. "The explosions are disrupting the hive mind's control systems." Morrison activated his ship's self-destruct sequence as the USS Freedom approached the base's core. Around him, his mixed crew of humans and aliens worked calmly at their stations, preparing for death with the same efficiency they had shown in life. "Admiral," Rodriguez said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." "Likewise, Captain," Morrison replied. "See you on the other side." The Freedom struck the heart of the Void Reaper structure and exploded in a blast of antimatter that lit up half the system. The chain reaction spread through the organic base as stored energy and absorbed technologies overloaded simultaneously. But Morrison had ejected at the last second, along with key members of his crew. They floated in their escape pods, watching as the massive alien structure tore itself apart. Without the hive mind's control, the captured technologies began destroying each other. The remaining Void Reaper ships, cut off from their central intelligence, drifted helplessly in space. Some tried to flee, but coalition forces hunted them down with ruthless efficiency. The aliens had taught the galaxy well. There would be no mercy for something that ate civilizations. Weeks later, Morrison stood before the coalition assembly once again. But this time, the representatives of 47 worlds rose to their feet as he entered. The chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human primitiveness now thundered with respectful applause. Admiral Zethkar approached with what passed for humility among the Velkari. His scales, once pristine, now bore the scars of battles fought alongside humans. "Admiral Morrison," he said formally, "we owe humanity an apology, and a debt we can never repay." Morrison nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with quiet dignity. "Just remember this lesson, Admiral. Never mock the species that turned warfare into an art form. We didn't get to the stars by being nice. We got here by being too stubborn to die." Rodriguez, standing beside him, whispered quietly, "Think they finally understand what HFY means?" Morrison smiled as he looked out at the galaxy that had learned to respect human determination. "Humanity, yeah. They're about to find out what that really means when we start expanding into those empty Void Reaper systems." The war was over, but humanity's real journey was just beginning. They were no longer the junior species to be mocked and dismissed. They were the apex predators that other civilizations both respected and feared, the species that had taught the galaxy what it truly meant to fight for survival.